when I started planning the series, I didn't want to do like a traditional detective series that always starts with like a murder, and then there's a murder investigation, and then there's a murder, and there's already a lot of those, and many of them are really, really well told. So that was a familiar structure that I didn't want to go into. But still, I wanted to stay within the police detective story world. So I needed to create a universe where I could sort of skip around a little bit in the traditional way of telling a detective story. And then I needed like a group of people that didn't have to follow the rules. And I had an old idea from when I was a young policeman in the 90s, and we worked in a basement very similar to the one in the books, right, at the bottom of the corridor. And we were young and we were very ambitious, and we took on every case there was. Like, wow, this is breaking and entry, fantastic, I'll do it. Driving without a license, yes, that's my case. Right? I mean, we were working a lot. Then at the end of this corridor were 3 doors that were closed, and we didn't think anyone was working there. And one day there was someone's birthday, so someone brought in like birthday cake, and they put it in the coffee break room. And these 3 doors swung open, and 3 gentlemen came out, older gentlemen, and they were slightly like red-eyed and smelling of mint, and right. And they just nodded, and they each took a piece of birthday cake, nodded again, and then went back to their rooms, and more or less never to be seen again, right? They just disappeared. And everyone went, who were they? Were they here the whole time when we were working? And rumors started going around saying, oh, this guy, he was a very famous investigator, but then his wife divorced him and he drank too much. And this guy, he had an accident. And so there was a lot of rumors going around about these being like legendary policemen. But then, they were put there to, because they couldn't work with anyone else anymore. They couldn't be near the public. You couldn't fire them because they're government employees, right? So they just put them somewhere and gave them like nonsense cases to work at. So I had this idea brewing a long time. And then also at later stage, I worked in a police reception where you answer calls, and people call the police about everything, especially when there's a full moon at night. People call about, the Swedish king is spying on me through the electric socket, or, I have an alien in my backyard. What do I do? They call about everything, and you have to write it down, because if you call the police, you have to write this down. So I write this down and you send it up in the system somewhere. And I always thought, the poor master who has to read this and say, oh, there's an alien in my, well, I don't think there is, right? So someone somewhere in this big police department would have to deal with this. So I combined these 2 ideas and say, well, these cases, they end up in the basement with these people who can't work with anyone anymore. And then, of course, to create some dynamic, I need a high performer like Leo. She's a very, very good detective, not so good with people, high performer. And she's put together with these low performers, extreme low performers. And I get this interesting dynamic. And I can work cases from whatever I want to as well. So that's sort of how I came up with the whole idea, whole concept of them. I think it's also a matter of spending time with the characters. So you can plan it in advance and say, right, so throughout 4 books, this is going to happen. But then when you start to actually write it, then things happened and they react differently than you planned. And you sort of get to know them as well. And then you find, well, I would like to know a bit more about this. I didn't plan it, but I think I need to write about the scene when Leo is in school. How does she adapt to school? How is Leo in the 3rd book that is out now in Sweden? So what did happen between Leo and her mother, for instance, right? There's an interesting relationship as well. So it sort of develops as the series goes along, I think, as well. It's like everything I'm writing, it's a mix of planning and organic growth, really, things that happen. And also when the characters interact with each other, how much of their character development do I have to tell like a backstory, and how much can you actually see from how they're reacting to things and what they're doing. And in El Hombre de Cristal is a lot about her father, and he wants her help in solving a murder that he's accused of, right? And she doesn't want to help him at all because he's a terrible person. He tried to kill her. On the other hand, he says, well, if you don't help me, I'm going to kill everyone that comes near, right? So I'm going to blow the whole thing up, and a lot of people are going to die. So you're going to have to help me. So she's forced to helping someone that she really doesn't want to help, and she knows she's being manipulated by him. So is he innocent or isn't he? I mean, did he do it? Maybe he did. So she realizes that she knows she's being manipulated, and she's trying to, I know that I'm being, and he knows that I know, but does he know that I know, and how much, that they're constantly, they have this chess game going on, which I found really, really interesting between Leo and her father, which is a constant power struggle that you don't know who's deceiving who, and still in between them they have to solve this murder case as well, right? So I really enjoy it. I mean, her father is one of the easiest characters to, strangely, to write about. I mean, he's like a Bond villain, right? But it's still, yeah, for some reason those scenes comes very easily. Roughly, yeah. 60% is planned and 40% I just leave open for organic things that just happen during the process, roughly. So I try to have like a skeleton of this is where the story begins and this is where it ends, and here's a couple of plot twists. And then in between, I just let things happen. So this it's a mix for me as well. Especially, I think, as further along I progress in the series, it might be 50-50. So because the characters sort of take over as well, and they start doing things that, well, I didn't plan this. Let's see where we're going, right? So it's very interesting when that happens, because it's like the story is now not me driving the story according to plan. The story is now driving me off the plan, and I'm just following it, right? And trying to, what's going on here? I don't know, but I'm still writing it. So it's fascinating when those things happen. So I try to get a good mix of the two, really. Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people who work like in the police, or in also like if you work in ambulances or wherever, you tend to see a lot of people when they're at their worst, right? It's very rarely that someone calls the police and say, "Come here, we'll buy ice cream and it's a great day in the park," right? If you're called to the park, something has gone wrong in the park, typically. And I think it's very easy to become very cynical as well if you're working that for many, many years and you see just the worst part of people's behavior, towards each other, really, really heavy stuff. And it's sometimes also difficult to remember that, there's another part of society that doesn't affect you in your work, because you don't work with that part, you work with the bad part of it, and to remain like a normal person and not becoming cynical and not distrusting everything and everyone, right? So I think that's a challenge for everyone who's working that sector of the world, right? It's very easy to focus on the bad things, and especially then if you read the news as well, it's just focused again. Very few sunshine stories, always about the bad things, but there are some nice things as well. So that for me, it's more to remember that rather than say, right, yeah, there's going to be problems, and they are, and I still, whenever I go into a room, I check where the emergency exit is, and I keep an eye around and say, well, that looks a bit right. So, but trying to remember that there are also like sunshine in the park, right? There are good days as well, even the small ones. So I think that's more the challenge than the other things. And then I think it's very interesting that you said that people like crime stories because they talk about society. But I think also my theory is why people love crime fiction. Not just because it's like suspenseful and violent, and you can read it and it's safe and you can read about serial killers, but I think it's also that compared to society, in society you have a lot of questions. Why did this happen, and why did this person do that? And you don't always get the answers, right? And you can have terrible crime that there's a suspect, but he didn't get jail time, or he didn't get punished, or he got a very small punishment compared to. But if you read a crime novel, there will be questions, but they will be answered at the end. You will find out who did it and why and how and everything. All your questions will be answered. In 98% of all crime novels, the bad guys get their punishment some way or the other. They end up in prison, they die, whatever, but they get some kind of punishment. And that punishment that sort of matches their crime as well. And so in crime novels, almost always, the good guys win, the bad guys lose. Almost always. It could be the other way around. If the story is about a bad guy, he could win, but he's still our good guy, right? So at the end of the crime novel, you get this satisfaction. So, all right, I got my questions answered, and the good guy, my team won, right? And that doesn't happen all the time, especially not now, I think, in society, right? So I think that's why my theory is that's why people like crime novels so much. That at least I know when I open this book that at the end the good guys are going to win, right? This is a perfect place to ask me that question, because this is a library, right? And my mom is a librarian. So I was brought up in a small country town. My father's a farmer. My mom is a librarian. It was the 70s, no internet, only 2 TV channels. That was it, right? But there were books. Yeah, right. There were books. And I had constant access to books because my mom had the keys to the library and the alarm code. So I had 24/7 access to whenever I wanted to books. So like so many writers, I am first and foremost a reader. We start out as readers, all of us. Just read and read and love reading and love the storytelling. And I've read I read everything I could get a hold of because I just love that. And I kept that love of books and reading when I was in the police, because this was the 90s, so we're still not that much internet, and you were working odd hours. So I was off when some of my friends were working, and again I kept reading. I had no idea really that it could be a job, but I kept reading because I had this love of books and of storytelling. And then I ended up with a job I worked as a security manager in Europe, so I traveled a lot. So I had a lot of time on flights and on hotel rooms. And again, this is before Wi-Fi on the plane, right? So there was really nothing to do. It's a long flight from Frankfurt to Cape Town. It's a 12-hour flight, right? What do you do? And when you're writing, one of the things you need a little bit of imagination, right? You need a little bit of talent. Most of it is actually practice, but you need a little bit of talent. You need courage to get started, and then you need time, blocks of time where you can stay in your world. And all these sort of met at that time. Well, actually I lacked the courage, because I wanted to start, because I had the idea, wow, I want to try. Now I've been sitting in the back seat enjoying other people's stories. Can I drive the car? And then I didn't. And then my wife just sort of, we had a discussion, and she just said, when are you going to start writing? I know you want to. You haven't told me anything about that. I know you want to. So when? And she sort of pushed me into doing it. So all these things sort of converged at that time, that I had the courage, a little bit of talent, and time and interest, of course. And I tried my first story, writing my first story. I think it actually was on a plane, where I tried, and I realized, this is so much fun. I love this. This is just as fun as reading. And my first novel was, mix up everything I've ever. It wasn't very good. It was just a mix of everything I've ever read. I tried to do everything at once, like a carpenter using the hammer and the saw and the screwdriver at the same time. Not a good idea, but it was so much fun. And I realized, all right, I just need a bit of a practice, because you also need practice, like everything else. And I think I might actually be good at this. And as it turns out, this is my job now. I love it. I originally planned and I promised my Swedish origin publisher 4 books. So that was in the contract. So I need to deliver 4 books. And then I said, well, if I'm still enjoying the writing, and more importantly, if the readers are enjoying the reading, well, I might be open for more books. And we're currently in that discussion now. I still very much enjoy, after writing 3 of them, I can definitely see there being more books in this series, because I still like the universe. There's so much still to explore. I can try on different styles. I mean, in L'assassino della montagna was a serial killer, right? In El hombre de cristal, it's a little bit of horror, right? There's a touch of horror. It's an abandoned island. Is there aliens, or is there not? Is there a monster, or isn't there? It's like it's still a crime story, but I can flirt with different genres and use different techniques. I don't have to follow the same format every time, which means it's still very interesting for me. So we're currently talking about it, but I'm saying it's going to be. You're like the second person I'm telling this now. Definitely at least 2 more books. So definitely 6 in the series. Might be 8. We will see. But I think I'll sort of take it book by book then, and just, is it still fun? Is there still something to investigate? Is there still a good story? So I enjoy it a lot, and thankfully the readers do as well. So I'm very happy about that. I write 2 different book series, which the Asker series is published in Spain, and I have a separate one that I'm writing with my wife, which is a murder mystery. And one of the first adult writers I ever read when as a child was Agatha Christie, because that was, I've read all the books for youth. So my mom said, I need to give him something else. It probably has to be a suspense story, but it hasn't to, be too scary. So she gave me Agatha Christie, and I've read everything that's printed Agatha Christie in Swedish. I've read, right? And I keep coming back to them because we're writing murder mysteries now. And one of my favorites is still Evil Under the Sun, which is a classic Agatha Christie. It's on an island, isolated, and it follows all the rules of a classic puzzle murder mystery, because there are a lot of rules in a murder mystery, right? It has to be an exotic place, an island in Greece, right? Has to be a limited number of people there, which there are, of course. They all have to be suspects. So they all have to have a motif of some sort. There's a murder. The murder it can't be too terrible because it's really, in a murder mystery, it's not really a murder. It's an enigma. It's a mystery, not so much a murder, right? It is a murder, but yeah, we leave out the details, right? So, and then of course there is an interesting way of somewhere in this story we're looking at the thing and we're thinking this is what's going on, but really it's something else. And then when it's explained to us at the end, when they gather all the suspects in the library and the detective shows up, there has to be a detective, of course. I mean, Hercule Poirot, he's the detective of detectives, he shows up. And I've always wondered, if I was a killer and I was supposed to kill someone, and I have 52 weeks in a year to plan it, why do I pick the week when the most famous detective in the world, Hercule Poirot, is visiting? Why? Why not the week before? Why not the week after? Why does it have to be that week? And that's another thing with murder mysteries, that there's no expectation of realism whatsoever, right? Because this is more of a fantasy. And then when it's explained at the end, if it's a really, really good murder mystery, you go, oh, I was so close. So you guess wrong, but you think that you almost guessed it right, because there's a very, very small target in between deceiving the reader and the reader feeling that he has been deceived, right? If the reader feels, no, you tricked me, so don't like this book, but you still trick them, but they don't feel tricked, and it's that little area. And I think Evil Under the Sun is one of those that really is like a perfect murder mystery. So that, for those who like murder mysteries, that would be the one. I also would like to recommend the Wallander series, Henning Mankell, which came out in the 90s. Been filmed both in Swedish and in English with Kenneth Branagh, who also played Poirot. So there's a nice segue between the two. But the Wallander, which is about a police detective in southern Sweden who investigates crime, and they're very linked to Henning Mankell. Was very into criticizing the society, education, poor people, rich people. He was very, very engaged in society. He opened schools in Africa. He had a very big heart, and he managed actually to tell a very interesting detective story, traditional one, murder investigation, but he also managed to say something about society. I think that's why all the Wallanders has been. You like the character very much because he's not perfect, and also you like the stories because there is some kind of a morale built into them. So the Wallander series will be mine. And then the third recommendation with them will be my personal favorite, which is Jo Nesbø, the Norwegian author, he hasn't written anything bad ever whatsoever. All of his books are good. They're just levels of great. My favorite is Red Robin. I think and he writes still detective stories, but they have a thriller tone to them as well. And Jo has managed to take the most used cliche in the genre, the detective who is, his bosses doesn't like him, he drinks too much, he has all these problems, he's a very, very broken soul, and for each book he gets physically even more damaged, and it's really, really a cliche. But Jo does it so well, he writes it so we forget all about that, we just accept the whole thing. And even in cases, I think by now he's investigated, I think 8 or 9 serial killers. And in every book he comes to his bosses and he says, well, I think it's a serial killer. And his boss says, no, it's not a serial killer. And he says, well, it is. I have some experience. I have now 8 serial killers behind me. And they go, well, this time you're wrong, right? And we still accept it because he does it so well. So that will be my Agatha Christie, Henning Mankell, and Jo Nesbø. That will be a nice mix of recommendations.